What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with the Detroit Lions free agency update, man. Today, we're going to be diving into the salary cap side of things to, again, update the Detroit Lions salary cap situation, as the Lions have reworked a deal today, and we also have some more contract details. So let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're back with some Lions free agency talk. But again, we're going to be updating this salary cap situation for the Lions. I guess technically this morning we dropped a video on Jalen Reeves-Maybin signing to the Lions and also updating the salary cap situation based on what we knew at that time, specifically with the whole Jack Fox restructure. But today we have some more news on the salary cap side for the Lions, and I just kind of want to do these short little videos just to kind of keep us all in the loop of what's going on, where the Lions sit at financially, and then what could also potentially be on the horizon because of maybe the moves that we're seeing with salary cap. So feel free to let me know in the comments below your theories on what could be happening with what we know so far, and I'll kind of give you guys my theories of what I am seeing. But the biggest thing that we need to start off first with here is Big V, our right guard. Halapulavati Vaitai. Nailed that. Now, this is a player that we've talked a lot about this offseason and free agency before free agency opened up. And he was a guy that I think we talked a lot about the potential cutting of a guy like Big V. Same thing with Romeo Quora. And the main reason for that for a guy like Romeo was, he's coming off the injuries. He didn't look great this past season. He had 1 year left on his deal plus the void year. And it was also a pretty high cap hit. So while you would be taking on some dead cap, you would also be opening up some cap space as well. And that was a very similar situation here with Big V, because Big V was under contract through 2024. But considering the fact that he's coming off a year where he did not play, even though you really like him when he plays, his cap number was also, I believe, just under $12.5 million, which, if you look at over the cap, that cap number for this season would have been the third highest for a right guard. So to me, it was never about like, oh man, Big V can't play, we're trying to get out of this. It was never that situation with him specifically. I would have always preferred to keep Big V around with the Lions, but it was always just wondering, would the Detroit Lions look down that path with him, considering how high his cap it is, considering his age, and then also considering the fact that he's coming off a year where he didn't play with the Lions. So would the Lions be looking to that to try to open up some cap space? But then, as free agency started to go along, the Detroit Lions ended up reworking Romeo Quora's deal, which was basically just a pretty big pay cut, lowering his cap number for this season. They saved like $9 million on that. They've restructured multiple players, including Tracy Walker, Jack Fox, opening up a lot of cap space. They've made, again, they're 1 year deals, but a little bit bigger splashes this year. They've thrown some void years on that, as we'll see. So then, to me, it got to the point where I was like, I don't even know if the Lions are going to end up touching this Big V contract, because the only reason you do it, in my opinion, would be if you really need to open up cap space because you have to go pay somebody. There's someone out there that you want to get, so you need to have cap space. But if you financially were able to make it work where you didn't have to, there was a clear out after this season where you would only have just over $2 million in dead cap, but you would save like $9.5 million if he was cut, if you kept him through this year, and then next year you decide you want to cut him. So you had a pretty big out next season if you were able to get into this year. However, it has been reported today that the Detroit Lions have reworked Big V's deal somewhat similarly to Romeo Quora, I would say, and they opened up a ton of cap space here with Big V. So as I said, look at the cap number now. I believe originally it was like $12.445 million, and that was the cap number, I believe, for the next 2 seasons. So there's a couple things to point out here. First off, that cap number is now just over $5 million. All right, so that's a massive savings, right? That's like, what, $7.5 million less of a cap number for the season. His base salary was also for 2023 set at $9.4 million, and same thing for 2024, because like I said, he was actually under contract beyond this year, because originally back in 2020, he signed a 5-year $45 million deal, and it was backloaded, which is why the cap numbers were raising like they were. And again, he was originally signed to be a tackle, but the Detroit Lions, from the past regime, the Detroit Lions in 2021, they basically stuck him at right guard. He did pretty well there. He actually did really well there. And just this past season, he missed it all because of an injury. He's had some injury issues that he's had to deal with, but he was under contract next year. So that's the other thing that you also notice about this. 2024 is now a void year. He's not even under contract through 2024. Now, again, you still would have to pay that $3.8 million of a cap number, even if he's not here next year, unless you extend him, that could go into it. But you're going to have to pay that with him not being here at this point. But now he's not even under contract. Now, I think the interesting thing about this, and I could be wrong because I can't see his old contract, but I do believe that technically it would have been a lower dead cap hit for the Detroit Lions if they would have went in with the original contract, what it was yesterday, if they would have went into that contract, kept him through the season, and the next year decide to cut him, I think they would have actually had a lower dead cap than what they now have because of this void year, which I think makes things really interesting, because then you think, well, they really wanted to create some cap space, and maybe that's to make another move, or maybe that's just simply because they felt like they needed to create more cap space heading into the draft and the UDFAs and all of those things. But they definitely created a good amount of cap space now, kind of locks him into this season. As you can see, you cut him, you'd actually lose $2.6 million, so that's not something the Lions are going to do. And then again, next year's a void year, so you open up a ton of cap space, basically agreeing to I guess in a sense, a cut for Big V here. And I think this is one thing that I definitely brought up too, as well as when I looked at the whole Big V situation, I thought maybe this is something that would be able to get done, just because the fact that he's of his age, the fact that he's coming off an injury, his deal could still be better technically here for what he's getting paid than what it may be elsewhere, you know, than what someone else may be willing to pay him at this point in time, even with a pay cut. So Big V agreed to that, and now he's basically locked in for this year, but it looks like this could definitely be his last year with the Lions. Now, there's also another thing that I want to point out to this situation is Jonah Jackson, all right? I think this is important to bring up. We know Jonah Jackson is not under contract next year, right? This is his last year on his rookie deal with the Lions. He was not a first-round pick. He was a third-round pick, so there's no fifth-year option for the Lions. So with the Jonah Jackson situation, we think about, could the Detroit Lions look to extend him? And again, this is back to the point that I made where, well, next year you could have just cut Big V, so clearly the Lions may be wanting to open up some cap space now. But even with that being said, still, with that cap number being much lower, it does open up a lot of cap space for next season. And with Jonah Jackson, if the Lions next year decided, hey, we want to bring back Jonah Jackson, we want to re-sign Jonah Jackson, well, I have a guy that maybe not exact, may not be the exact number, because again, the salary cap is always kind of going up, but just to kind of put into perspective, one guy that just recently got a deal, 2022, he signed this deal with the Miami Dolphins, was a guy by the name of Connor Williams. He signed a 2-year, $14 million deal, played really well. He was stuck at left guard, played really well there. I think he was 25 years old at the time, and he got a 2-year, $14 million deal. I wouldn't be surprised if Jonas was higher than that, just because of where we are years-wise, and the cap number, again, would be expected to go up, and he'd be re-signing with the same team, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's more. But again, he'll be like 27 at that time, so he's also going to be an older prospect. But if the Detroit Lions, say, for example, wanted to re-sign him, and let's just be very basic with this, 2 years, $14 million, cut that in half, that's $7 million. So let's say you took that $7 million plus that $3.8 million in dead cap, because again, you're still going to have to pay that a Big V. That puts you at a number of about $10.8 million. So let's say, for example, that's a $10.8 million cap it we're saying to also re-sign a guy like Jonah Jackson. That's still technically lower by well over $1 million than what Big V's cap number was set for 2024. So I don't know about another contract here for the Detroit Lions. Let me see if I can find him in here. I think he's right around here. Yep, that's it. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We now have the contract details on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson according to Over the Cap, so it does now affect the cap space. For a while, we didn't have this in here. That's because it wasn't too long ago that he signed, but now we have them. But again, he was originally reported to sign 1-year, $8 million deal with the Lions. As you can see, that's definitely not the number that he's getting here. It's more of the valuation, as you can see here, of a 1-year, $6.5 million deal. So it's lower than what we originally heard. And this is, again, what a lot of times happened. We saw this yesterday with Emmanuel Mosley. It wasn't the exact number. I think it was like $1 million less. There's that side of it, which $6.5 million in total. But you're still not taking all that $6.5 million on for this season, because again, what the Lions did, because it's only a 1-year deal, it's more difficult to do this. Okay, now again, you can always extend these players, because while you're paying this money, if you extend them, you can always do that. So you can kind of prolong these situations. But it stinks to kind of backload a deal, I would think, for a guy that's only got a 1-year deal. But the way that you can do it, as we've seen with a lot of players now, I don't know where I can find the total of this, but I gotta assume it's a pretty high amount. But the Lions threw another void year on his deal, spreading out that prorated bonus, basically meaning that he's kind of locked into this year. As you can see, he's probably not going to go. They know he's going to make the team. So there's definitely good bonuses, $4 million of a prorated bonus, and only $2.5 million is base salary. So they feel pretty good about him making the team. I'm sure that was very intriguing to Gardner-Johnson to just kind of know he's getting that money and like, hey, I'm here. But also on top of that, they did throw a void year on that deal, so he gets it. But for the Lions, now the cap number is only $4.5 million. So it's almost about half of what we originally heard that it was reported at 1 year, $8 million. It's only $4.5 million cap hit or cap number. But again, the point to this is that the Lions did throw another void year on this deal. And they've done this with a pretty good amount of contracts. You know, I got to believe that they're looking out there and understanding the situation, but they've done this with a lot of deals. We don't know about Jalen Reese-Maybin. We also don't have the contract details on Graham Glasgow either, according to Over the Cap. And because we don't have those, don't know how they're going to affect the cap space, because I believe both those will fall. They'll both fall in the top 51. That means the Detroit Lions have actually a pretty good amount of money now in cap space, because I believe those are the only two, really the main cap numbers that were missing here. And Graham Glasgow was originally reported to, I believe, sign a one-year $4 million deal, and I wouldn't assume Jalen Reeves-Maybin's deal is going to be that big, considering he just kind of got his big deal, but was let go after one season on a 2-year, $7.5 million deal with the Houston Texans. According to Over the Cap, not including those two, the Lions have $26 million in cap space. We talked about the draft class and how that's going to kind of factor into this, right? The $8 million, things like that. But that leaves the Lions with a pretty good amount of cap space, a lot of flexibility. So does that mean another move is potentially on the horizon? I mean, it's possible. Obviously, the biggest names of free agency, a lot of them are no longer available. Remember, some guys sign after the draft, depending on position specifically, like a backup quarterback, for example. If the Lions want to sign that and draft one, a backup quarterback could be waiting till after the draft, but you still have moves like that, so you still want to have cap space open. I think that's still one of the clear needs here. I think everybody's got their eyes on a guy like DJ Chark, because when you look at the Lions' current situation, if you just look at the players that are under contract for 2024, now at cornerback, Cameron Sutton is really the only cornerback that we have, which is part of the reason I think they'll draft one. Receiver, we have Jamison, rookie deal, St. Brown, rookie deal, under contract, but DJ Chark, maybe the Detroit Lions are looking to bring a guy like that back, and that's part of the reason they're opening up the salary cap. Now, if that's possible, let's just think about this for a second, because it sounds like it's between us, maybe Carolina, maybe Kansas City. If something like that happened, to Rad's point that he made, because originally I was thinking that that would have to be a multi-year deal, but if he doesn't feel like he's getting good offers out there for a multi-year deal, maybe similarly to the situation with a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he could potentially, because he's only 26, decide, you know what, I want to go sign another prove-it deal. And maybe he could decide, I want to go back to the Lions and do that, because there's stability there at the quarterback position. He didn't have that with Jacksonville. Going to Carolina, you would think it's going to be better, but it's still going to be a rookie. So, you know, outside of a team like Kansas City, like a lot of teams, there's going to be some questions probably with stability there. He knows what it's going to be with the Lions. I think 3/4 of his catches were first downs this past season. He had one of the highest yards per reception rates in the NFL. He scored 30 points a game when he was with us. He fit into the culture. So for the Lions, if they don't necessarily want to go give him a big extension, right, and DJ Chark is sitting there saying, man, I'm not getting that multi-year deal that I'm looking for yet, he could potentially, I'm not saying he'll do it, but he could look at what Gardner-Johnson did and say, you know what, I'm going to take a one-year deal back with you guys. And now the Lions may have that flexibility to do that because of how much cap space they've actually opened up for this year. Because again, to me, as much as this can help us for 2024, I don't think it's maybe completely for 2024, because again, like I said, if you were able to get in, and maybe they didn't feel comfortable with it, but if they were able to get into the season while also taking on the original contract of Big V, you could then cut him next year, and I believe actually have less dead cap than what you have now because of his new deal. So I think it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe it's not DJ, maybe it's I know Bobby Wagner, he's one of the biggest guys out there. I don't kind of expect that. Maybe it's an Odell, you know, I don't expect that either. But I do keep in mind a guy like that because of the fact of maybe he does want to get a one-year deal back. And if that's the case, the Lions actually may be one of the best cap space situation teams to actually be able to take on that cap number for this year. I'm just saying, I think it's an interesting thing to think about. We know they're not afraid of throwing void years on deals, but just an idea. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There's my theory. Let me hear yours. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.